I've definitely been through the whole perfectionism phase. I've been through the procrastination phase, and sometimes I still slip into it. So it's not about like never doing these things again, but it's about becoming aware and starting to take actions toward changing it. Welcome to Empower and Evolve, the vortex of growth that you have been looking for. I am your host, Kat Tunnyberg. I'm a mindset coach for female leaders, and I am committed to helping you cultivate the mindset shifts that generate you wild success. Each episode, we explore ways to tap into your true potential. We face the shadows that hold you back, and we embrace the journey toward your most abundant life. If you love what you learn here today, then I invite you to share this episode with someone that needs to hear it. Right, it's time to plunge in. Hello, my love. Welcome to this episode on the fear of failure. I wonder if you can recognize yourself in this. You have an idea. You want to start a business. Maybe you want to pivot your business. You have this genius idea and you're really excited by it. And you know that there's a need for it, but you delay starting it. Instead of actually taking action towards starting it, you spend endless time researching the subject, asking for advice from the people around you, but you never actually take the first step. Or maybe you recognize yourself in this example. You know that you need to craft your next beautiful email for your newsletter, or maybe you need to craft this beautiful social media post to promote your upcoming program or your upcoming products, you need to write content. You need to put yourself out there. And even though you understand the importance of these tasks and know how crucial they are for your business growth, instead of actually taking action, you find yourself distracted. You find yourself scrolling social media. You find yourself watching videos that aren't even relevant to what you are wanting to do. Or maybe you start deep cleaning your office, or God knows what. You do all these different things. You procrastinate on taking the action towards the task that is needed to grow your business because it feels so overwhelming and it brings up discomfort. And instead of taking action, you just let your fear take over. Does that sound familiar? Procrastination is probably one of the most common ways that fear of failure actually shows up in other entrepreneurs. So I wonder if you can recognize yourself in these behaviors. And maybe this is the first time that you actually realize that these behaviors are connected to the fear of failure. And remember, I always teach you the first step towards change is awareness. So maybe you're listening to this podcast the first few minutes and you're like, oh my freaking God, that is me. This is literally what I do. Wow, maybe I have a fear of failure. Maybe this is the moment you realize. So what even is the fear of failure? Like, what is it? What is it? It's this intense worry, or maybe apprehension about not meeting a set standard of success. So because you have this worry or apprehension, you actually find yourself never taking action instead. And you come up with all these excuses and you just procrastinate and you never do the thing. And you tell people you want to do the thing, but you never do the thing. And it's actually easier to then blame it on outside excuses instead of taking action and just be like, well, I didn't have time, or like, oh, I'm too busy. Like, oh my freaking God, anytime someone gives me like, I'm too busy excuse, I just want to throw something in their face. Because we make time for the things that are important to us. We make time for the things that are important to us. And if you're currently not making time for your business, then your business is not actually that important to you. I'm sorry to break it to you. You may think it's important to you, but unconsciously, you've decided that it's not that important. Remember, 95% of our actions are unconscious. Like unconsciously doing certain things or having And that's why bringing up your unconscious values and what actually is important to you and realizing around your boundaries, etc., is so crucial because it can actually show you where you are out of alignment with your true goals. And you need to watch my Becoming the Matriarch Masterclass. You need to watch it. I'll link it below because I talk in there around how to make sure that you live a values-based life. And I also teach you around boundaries. And this is going to be really epic for you in regards to moving past this fear of failure. And this is the work that I do with my clients, both in my one-on-one spaces as well as in my Liberated Woman Mastermind, which is going to be opening its doors again in March, maybe potentially even at the end of February. I haven't decided yet. But keep your eyes open for that if that is something that you're interested in. But for now, watch my free masterclass. I'll have it in the show notes below for you to check out. Seriously, such a game changer if you start to realize where you're out of alignment and you can start to bring yourself into alignment. But coming back to the fear of failure, how does it even start? Why do so many people struggle with the fear of failure? And instead of taking action, they come up with all these excuses and they procrastinate. Well, first of all, there's this societal pressure that we need to succeed and that success needs to look a certain way. But the truth is that success looks different to every single person. And success is going to look different to you at different phases of your life. Maybe when you're first starting your business, having your first paying client is like amazing, epic success. But 10 years down the track, having just one client would potentially be looked as a failure. So the way that you view success changes over time. Like for me, when I first started my entrepreneurship, it was definitely about making money, etc. And now it's so much more. Like it's not just about the money, like it's really about the impact and receiving the feedback that people's lives are being changed through the things that I teach them or the things that I help them move through. And success is not just monetary, but it's for me, it's freedom. It's being able to do the things I want to do when I want to do them. There's so much to this. But first, it's like starting to recognize, like, where is this pressure even coming from? And this certain expectation that success needs to look a certain way. Is that even yours? And then there's also the possibility that your parents pushed towards a certain level of success and made it seem like failure was something to be avoided at all costs. And maybe you've in the past had failure, quote unquote, failures, and those have led to negative experiences, negative consequences. And now you just have this fear of taking action again because of your past experiences. I've mentioned this before in some of the other podcast episodes, but if you continue just looking at your past and letting your past hold you back from taking the steps forward into your future, you are just going to be reliving your past over and over again. Your past does not define your future. And the moment that you can actually let go of your past and decide to move forward into the future is the moment when you're really going to be able to create the life of your dreams. So what are some of the ways that the fear of failure might manifest in your life? You may be avoiding taking risks or trying new things because of you wanting to sidestep the possibility of failing. Or maybe you are a perfectionist. You have this excessive drive to be perfect and viewing anything less than perfect as something that is deemed a failure. Or maybe your fear of failure is showing up as this low self-esteem, where because you have this persistent fear of failure, you have this diminished sense of self-worth and you're overly self-critical because, again, like if you're not measuring up to this certain level of standard of what you think you should be measured up against, you deem yourself as a failure. And I've already mentioned this at the beginning, but one of the most common ways that the fear of failure actually shows up is procrastination. So delaying or avoiding tasks due to the fear that the results will not meet your high standards. And remember, most of this has happened unconsciously. It's not like you start scrolling your phone consciously being like, oh, I'm going to avoid taking action on my business and procrastinate because I'm afraid I'm not going to meet my standards. Like, that's not the thought pattern that gets you into your procrastinating behaviors. This is all unconsciously happening. The other thing that how it might manifest is through anxiety and stress. So having this constant worry that you're going to fail, which then leads to this heightened anxiety and stress, which affects your mental and your physical health. And then the final piece is actually limiting your growth. If you have a fear of failure, you are directly limiting your growth because you are preventing yourself from pursuing opportunities for growth and for development and keeping yourself in your comfort zone or in your familiar zone, like I mentioned last week. And you just stay there instead of taking action and like progressing forward. So you can see the fear of failure is huge, and most people experience it at one point or another, especially on their entrepreneurial journey. Like, I've definitely been through the whole perfectionism phase. I've been through the procrastination phase, and sometimes I still slip into it. So it's not about like never doing these things again, but it's about becoming aware and starting to take actions towards changing it. So my biggest tips on helping you overcome your fear of failure is, first of all, reframe failure. One of the things that I always teach my clients is there is no failure, there is only feedback. There is no failure, there is only feedback. Instead of looking at something, if it doesn't go the way that you hoped it to go, instead of looking at it as a failure, can you really look at it as a learning opportunity? Like, what did it teach you? Like, what did you learn from it? Anytime I've shared with you in the past about my failed, like quote unquote, failed launches, I actually take some time and ask myself, like, what went well? What didn't go as expected? Where could I have shown up differently? What could I have done differently? Is there some tweaking that needs to be done? How did I show up energetically? Do I have some unconscious blocks that are holding me back? What is really happening? Anytime we quote unquote fail, there's actually so much intel that we can take from the failure that we can distill into wisdom and take different actions moving forward. And this is where the gap versus gain concept comes in again. Instead of, constantly chasing this measure of success that you can't maybe even get to, can you start to look at where you started from? Like, where was the beginning point in your journey, and recognize how far you've already come and see that as success. So looking at the gain you've experienced from the beginning instead of the gap towards where you're going. These are the biggest reframes, like the moment that you can really truly embody this knowledge and start to take the time to reflect on your failures. So this is the key piece here. Take the time to reflect on your failures and ask yourself these kind of questions like, what went well? What didn't go as I hoped it would? What did I learn? What can I do differently next time? What was the biggest lesson here? Are there still any stories that I am telling myself about what happened or what didn't go as planned? So, for instance, I'll share this with you. As I am recording this, we are at the beginning of February. This will be shared, I can't even remember, 10th of February, maybe, is when you will listen to this. But we're in the beginning of February, and at the beginning of January, I set myself a really big goal. I set myself the goal to have my first 30K sales month. And I really worked on my energetics this month in January. Like, I really focused on being able to contain and hold my energy and look after myself, because I knew that for me, going from like a 20K sales month, which I've had a couple times in my life, but on average, I'm between, I don't know, 10 to 16K sales months. That's my average. I was going to go to 30, and I knew that it wasn't about working more, but it was more about really refining my messaging and working on my energetics. So I set myself this goal. And I had these beautiful experiences throughout the month where I could really feel the goal already happening and being in reality. And I didn't hit it. I had instead a 23K sales month, which is still to this day like my biggest ever sales month. Yay. And I could choose to look at this as failure, but I'm actually so distant from like having to have my goal here in this exact moment. And instead, I just have full certainty that it will happen within the coming months. Like I just have full certainty in my body that it will happen. And instead of like white knuckling my goal, I am releasing it to the universe and I just trust that it will be here. And I'm focusing on being that energetic match and taking the inspired action to bring that goal into reality. So I could look as January as a failure because I didn't hit my goal, or I could take the moment and reflect like what went well, what didn't go, like what could I have done differently? What did I learn? And there was a lot that I learned from January, and it's really beautiful to reflect. So this whole piece of there's no failure, there's only feedback, and then taking the time to reflect on what happened during your failure. Yeah, this alone can completely change your relationship with failure. I no longer am afraid of failure. Like I have had so many perceived failures and I always learn something from them. And this is how I am able to create the business that I have. This is how I'm able to support my clients in the way that I do. So this is the first step of overcoming the fear of failure, is really reframing failure as this necessary stepping stone towards refining things. Because the truth is you're never going to realize what really works for you until you experience what doesn't. You need to have these moments of being able to refine, because if something's always perfect, how will you know what doesn't work for you? It's this beautiful part of your evolution. There's no failure, there is only feedback. If you're loving this and you're like, oh my God, I need to share this with my girlfriend, please send it to her. Please share this with her. If you have anyone in your life that you know is struggling with the fear of failure and procrastinates or has this sense of perfectionism or never takes action, share this podcast with her. Maybe share it even on your socials. Like, there's no failure, there's only feedback. And maybe someone needs to hear this message exactly today. And maybe that's you. If that's you, send me a message. Let me know what really landed for you. The other piece here is starting to set goals that you know are achievable. And I want to do another series 1 month where I'm going to talk more into manifestation. I'm a big dreamer, you know, I have big goals and I have this big grand vision, and I have released a timeline for that. And instead, when I think about timeline goals, I think about, okay, like what is like slightly out of my comfort zone, slightly out of my familiar zone, but it still feels achievable. Like that's something that I think of. It comes into like bringing it into the sweet spot where your body doesn't go into a full freak out when you think about your goal. But this is going to be another podcast episode, so watch out for that coming in the future months. But when you think about setting your goals, can you make them achievable? Like just outside of your comfort zone, and at the same time still in a place where your body is like, ooh, I'm excited about this. Like you feel really great about it. And the final piece of how to overcome the fear of failure is developing resilience. The more times that you do the first two steps, where you set yourself achievable goals, and then if you experience a perceived failure, you take the time to reflect and see what you learn from it. The more times you do this, the more resilient towards failure you become, and you recognize that there is no failure, there is only feedback. And the more you do this, the more resilient you become, meaning that you are no longer afraid of taking the necessary steps. And instead, you allow yourself to fail when needed. And you know that that failure is going to give you such valuable feedback that you're going to be able to implement in order to move towards your bigger goals in the future. And there's nothing wrong with allowing yourself to receive help on this journey. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I need someone else to help me move through this, because sometimes that's the case. You know, when I was first moving through my fear of failure, it was so helpful having someone by my side who helped me find the feedback, who helped me realize what could have gone differently, how I could make those tiny tweaks to have a completely different experience. So allow yourself to receive help. Remember, there is no failure. There is only feedback, baby. This is it. Like this is, oh my goodness. This is the juice. So I hope you enjoyed this second episode of the Facing the Fear series, where I talk to you about the fear of failure. And you now recognize that there is actually no such thing as failure, because it's only ever feedback. And instead of allowing yourself to get trapped into procrastination or perfectionism, you now allow yourself to take these bold steps forward in order to create your dream life and success your way. I'll catch you next week. Thank you for joining me on the Empower and Evolve podcast. I hope that today's episode has sparked a new insight, or perhaps reminded you of your own power to manifest change. If you found value in our time together, I invite you to subscribe and share this podcast with someone who might need a little reminder of their own magical power. It would mean the world to me if you could take just 2 minutes to review the podcast and help it reach more people. And remember, the journey of transformation is ongoing. And sometimes the most powerful step that we can take is to simply pause, breathe, and realign with our deepest intention. Until next time.